Our next scholarship presentation will be for the recipients from the University of Virginia.
Dr. Despina Luca studied phase transition in condensed matter system. Dr. Luca is interested in understanding how the underlying interaction involving the spin, charge, and lattice degree of freedom lead to the emergent behavior and properties such as Polaron foundation, Taratello type distortion, spin, and charge density waves, superconductivity, and quantum spin liquid state. The most recent study of interest include topology, insulator, and semi-metal, spintronic, anti-ferromagnet, and others. The system have underlying microscopic functionality that can potentially lead to the industrial applications. The Luca group is also involved material synthesis and characterization of both property performed at the University of Virginia. Please welcome Professor Despina Luca.
Good morning, I just heard my whole bio. It's a great pleasure to be here today and congratulate all the award recipients. I'm attending alongside several of my colleagues from the University of Virginia. Let me first thank the foundation for supporting dozens of UVA students over the years. This year we are thrilled to know that 25 students will receive a scholarship from the Kimmy Duong Foundation. One of UVA's highest aspirations is to make education affordable and accessible. In fact, part of our strategic plan is to recruit and support bright, talented, diverse students from regardless of their economic backgrounds. We thank the foundation for its support of students in this endeavor. Our president of the university, Jim Ryan, encourages members of the university community to be great and good. We thank the Kimmy Duong Foundation for its great and good service model that has a lasting impact on students and their families. We hope that these scholarships will encourage our students to develop a sense of gratitude and develop to become citizen leaders of the world in a diverse and globally interconnected world. With that, I'd like to thank you for inviting us to be here today, and I look forward to welcoming the UVA students on the stage, and also thank you for your support over the years, and I look forward to continuing support for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Luca. Our first recipient from UVA is our Gold Scholar, Ms. Gabrielle Nguyen, who's currently a junior in nursing. She says the beauty in the world lies in the diversity of its people. Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Ngoc Ham Nguyen. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar, Ms. Isabella Le, who's currently a freshman majoring in neuroscience. Her quotes by Nelson Mandela: "Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again." Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Ngoc Ham Nguyen. Our next recipient is Diamond Scholar, Ms. Vivian Cao Dao. She's currently a senior majoring in interdisciplinary neuroscience. She says, if there is a book that you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, you must be the one to write it. A quote by Toni Morrison. Her scholarship is sponsored by Kaiser Permanente and presented by Ms. Myra Panagopoulos. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Kayleen Doe, who's currently a freshman majoring in computer science. Her quote is by Princess Diana. Carry out a random act of kindness with no expectation of reward, safe in the knowledge that one day someone might do the same for you. Her scholarship is sponsored by Kaiser Permanente and presented by Ms. Myra Panagopoulos. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Ka Yao Chen, who is currently a junior majoring in foreign affairs. She says, you will never always be motivated, so you must learn to be disciplined. Her scholarship is also sponsored by Kaiser Permanente and presented by Ms. Myra Panagopoulos. Next is our Gold Scholar, Mr. Fong Le, who is currently a sophomore in computer science. He says, if you can dream it, you can do it. His scholarship is sponsored by Kaiser Permanente and presented by Ms. Myra Panagopoulos. Our next recipient is Diamond Scholar Mr. Justin Nam Vinh, who's currently a junior majoring in biomedical engineering. His quote is by Theodore von Karman. Scientists study the world as it is. Engineers create the world that never has been. His scholarship is sponsored by Mrs. Chuk Brown and will be presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon, or Mrs. Chuk Brown, I apologize. Our next recipient is also Diamond Scholar Ms. Cherry Lin. She's a freshman studying computer science. Her quote is by Marie Curie. Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Lee Nguyen from Teletron and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Caroline Nguyen, who's currently a sophomore with an undeclared major. Her quote is, they say the best blaze burns brightest when circumstances are at their worst. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Lee Nguyen by Teletron and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. And next we have our Diamond Scholar, Ms. Emily Nguyen, who's currently a junior in nursing. She says, do my best and work hard for the things I wish to accomplish. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Lee Nguyen of Teletron and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Haley Nguyen, who is currently a junior studying arts and sciences. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you make them feel. Her scholarship is sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Lee Nguyen of Teletron and presented by Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar Ms. Thuy V. Bui, who's currently a junior majoring in biomedical engineering. She says, tough times never last, but tough people do. Her scholarship is sponsored by Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is our Diamond Scholar, Mr. Kenneth Nguyen, who's currently a sophomore majoring in computer science. He says, breathing in, I see myself as space. Breathing out, I feel free. His scholarship is sponsored by the Long Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Gold Scholar, Mr. Andrew Nguyen Tran, who's currently a sophomore majoring in computer science. He says, if you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else. His scholarship is sponsored by the Long and Kimmy Nguyen Family Foundation and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Mrs. Kimmy Yoon. Our next recipient is Diamond Scholar Ms. Mackenzie Pham, who is currently a freshman with an undeclared major. She says, if I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way. Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yoon. And our final recipient from UVA is our Gold Scholar, Ms. Melissa Vinh. She's currently a freshman with the major in architecture. She says, our gifts count for nothing if we don't make the world a better place. Her scholarship is sponsored and presented by Dr. Long Nguyen and Ms. Kimmy Yoon. And with that concludes our presentation for the recipients from the University of Virginia. Next, I would like to invite to the stage Dr. Phuong An Đặng Vũ to assist with the presentation for our next scholarship recipients.
Dr. Phuong An Đặng Vũ attended Briar Moore College, received medical degree from the Duke University School of Medicine, completed internship in internal medicine from Johns Hopkins Hospital, and residency in dermatology from the Hospital of University of Pennsylvania. Since 1992, she has been in private practice in dermatology in Northern Virginia.
Thank you. It is my honor to announce the scholarship presentation to the last two schools for today. Next will be the presentation to the recipients from Northern Virginia Community College.
Dr. Wu Chang is currently serving as the Vice President of Academic Affairs and Chief Academic Officer at Northern Virginia Community College. Dr. Chang has more than 25 years of experience in higher education. For 17 years, he worked at the Truckee Meadow Community College in Reno as a tenure professor of chemistry, chair of physical science department, faculty senate chair, and a member of several college-wide and statewide leadership committee. During 2004-2005, Dr. Chen became a member of American Council of Education Fellows. In 2010, he was named the Fellow of American Chemical Society. Currently, he is an active member of the Chemistry and Public Affairs Committee. Dr. Chen has also served in several important advisory boards, including such as Ohio Health Governance Advisory Board, the Trenton Public Education Foundation Board, and the National Science Foundation Funded Center for Energy Efficient Electronic Science. Dr. Chen earned a BS degree in chemistry in South Korea and a master degree in chemistry from Minnesota State University. After receiving the PhD in chemistry from the University of California, Los Angeles, he became a postdoctoral associate in the Department of Chemistry at Harvard University. Please welcome Dr. Ung Vu Chang.
Good morning. On behalf of Northern Virginia Community College, the NOVA, the Educational Foundation, and especially our NOVA, Long Yuan, and Kimmy Duong Scholars, thank you for your continued investment in students who are committed to pursuing higher education, and that your belief that education brings many benefits, including raising incomes, improving health, and fostering peace. This is the 5th year that the Kimmy Duong Foundation has invited NOVA students to apply for these important scholarship opportunities. We are honored to continue to partner with the foundation. Northern Virginia Community College is second largest community college in the United States, with 72,000 students over the 6 campuses throughout the Northern Virginia area. And you know, we actually produce a significant number of students actually for the workforce in the region, especially in the IT area and then the healthcare areas. And also we actually produce a lot of students for the transfer programs. So actually a lot of universities are represented here. In fact, actually UVA, several hundred students transfer each year. And George Mason, we transfer about 4,000 students. And the Virginia Tech, about 1,100. And VCU, another 1,000 students. So actually we are great partners actually with all 4 institutions. Our campus actually, one of the campuses, the Annandale campus, recently received actually $1.5 million from Department of Education to actually help a better relationship with the Asian communities in the region. So we built the Asian Center actually on our campus last year. And so we are having a lot of interaction with the immigrant communities actually in the Northern Virginia. And also, in fact, actually, we just named our theater and then forum at Annandale campus after Kimmy Duong because they supported our student services, so we recognized their actually support and by naming one of our buildings actually with the Kimmy Dương Foundation. And also, actually, I'm sorry, the Long Yuan and the Kimmy Dương, the theater and then the forum is a correct name for that. During the past year, in fact, actually, we emphasized a lot about one topic at Northern Virginia Community College, that's experiential learning. So all of the scholars today, actually you are very good in the academic records, we all know that. But actually, if you want to be more competitive in the job market, you need to actually have some other experience outside of the classroom. That's experiential learning, right? So undergraduate research, and internship, study abroad, and then service learning, leadership, all of these are very important. So this past spring, actually, Northern Virginia Community College sponsored statewide Community College Experiential Learning Conference, and we had 13 community colleges in Virginia participated with more than 200 students and faculty participated in the event. We are going to keep doing that every year. So actually, scholars, okay, you're very well recognized, but please look into these kind of experiential learning opportunities while you're at colleges and universities. In closing, okay, my hardest congratulations to the NOVA scholars who are recognized today, and also to all students who are awarded actually with this scholarship grant. And then thank you, Kimmy Dương Foundation, for your support to Northern Virginia Community College. Thank you.
The first recipient for NOVA is our gold scholar, Ms. Janatul Ferdos. She says, "We may not be responsible for the world that created our minds, but we can take responsibility for the mind with which we create our world." The scholarship is sponsored by Charity Group of Virginia and presented by Mr. Huyen Lê and Mrs. Hoa Lê. The next recipient is our silver scholar, Ms. Minh Thi Lê. She's a sophomore in accounting. She says, "Difficulty at the beginning usually means ease at the end." The scholarship is sponsored by Charity Group of Virginia and presented by Mr. Huyen Lê and Mrs. Hoa Lê. And our last recipient is gold scholar, Ms. Ha Nguyen. She's a sophomore in computer sciences. She used the Vietnamese proverb, "Có công mài sắt, có ngày nên kim," roughly translated as "practice makes perfect." The scholarship is sponsored by the Charity Group of Virginia and presented by Mr. Huyen Lê and Mrs. Hoa Lê. This concludes the presentation to the School of NOVA. Now we will continue with the presentation to the recipient from George Mason University.